You know what? In a world where pay-per-view isn't as important, seems to me we should have considered this guy even more. Maybe we should have had him on the list last time.
Welcome back to the Bohnfire podcast, where we talk about the UFC and mixed martial arts with those closest to the fight game. I am your host, longtime MMA reporter and MMA junkie senior reporter, Mike Bohn. We are back, folks. I had to take a little week off last week. It's hectic times right now in the life. That's all I can say. We got a wedding less than 2 weeks away. I was out at a bachelor party in British Columbia with some of my best friends from high school. Surprised a bunch of them while they were out on a golf trip. It was good times, still feeling the after effects a little bit, but it's a very busy time in life. I'm dealing with a lot here, trying to get organized as everyone prepares to come into town and marry my soon-to-be beautiful wife here. So had to take a little break there. There might be another one coming up next week, or maybe a little special wedding week episode. Still haven't decided yet, but as for today, we got a great show for you. We are bringing it, trying to make up for a little bit of lost time here. I want to do a quick look back first and kind of put a bow on Khamzat Chimaev's title win at UFC 319, since I didn't get to talk about it a ton. In order to do that, going to have my great MMA junkie colleague, Farah Hannoun, here for a few minutes to just talk about the Khamzat Chimaev story. She has been there since the very, very early days of his career. Was, I believe, the first person who ever mentioned his name to myself or anyone else at MMA Junkies. So she has covered the man. She knows all things in and out, and I would love to get her thoughts on the performance, what it meant, what's next, all that type of stuff. So Farah will make a quick stop in to kick things off, and then on the back end of the episode, it is time once again to rank the UFC's most valuable fighters with Luke Thomas, a re-ranking of sorts. We did our first episode, very well received by you all. You seemed to enjoy it, where we ranked who we thought were the UFC's top 10 most valuable fighters currently, looking ahead into the future, who can be the ones they can lean on the most, the best resources, the ones who can bring the most eyeballs to the sport, the most upside, all these different things. Luke and I will look back at our lists, kind of give them a review, and then update things, see who the shakers and the movers have been on that front. Another great conversation as we sit here on a rare UFC off week. I know a lot of people taking their breaks, but we're here trying to bring you a show when I can here before life gets super crazy here coming up. So enjoy this one. Was a lot of fun as always with Luke and Farah. Appreciate their time. Please make sure to like, subscribe, rate, comment, all these things on the show. Let's get us our boosts on all the platforms via YouTube, audio, Spotify, all these things. Wherever you listen to the show means a lot that you can show a sign of support. So I'm going to take a quick break, and I will be back with Farah Hannoun and then Luke Thomas. Back here on the Bohnfire is my fabulous MMA junkie colleague, Farah Hannoun, who has known the Khamzat Chimaev story almost since day one. So no one better to kind of put a bow on things here as we move on from UFC 319, Farah. But had to get your kind of take, your background on Khamzat. Just start with me, I guess, at the beginning. When did he first catch your eye?
So I think it was first because I would hear interviews from like Jimmy Manuwa, Ilia Latifi, Alexander Gustafsson, all the guys at All-Star Sweden would always rave about him as a training partner. And it's funny when we do these interviews, I guess we ask these questions like, who are some of your training partners? And people are like, boring question. But I actually think in hindsight, these questions end up being really cool, because I remember back in the day talking to Dan Hooker, and he used to tell me about this guy called Israel Adesanya that he trained with. He was in the UFC. Benil Dariush used to talk about Giga Chikadze. Those guys used to always talk about Khamzat Chimaev and how incredible he was. So I kept hearing about him. And then when I started kind of deciding to cover events in person, I started out at the Middle East, and because I wanted to get to know like my region a little bit better, like the local fighters. And Khamzat had just signed with Brave. And when I heard his name was going to be on one of the cards, it was his third pro fight. I was so excited because I'm like, man, I've heard so much about this guy. So that was kind of my first introduction to him. And then I believe he ran through the guy in over a minute or something, just over a minute. And I'm like, yep, okay, now I get it. Now I know why.
Yeah, he's the truth. I mean, I think I saw a clip surface throughout fight week 2 from like a very, very old Q&A with Brian Stan too, where like he got asked about who's like the best fighter of the UFC, and he didn't even know Khamzat's name, but he basically just said what you said. Like, you hear these things from the guys at All Stars, and when he gets here, he's going to be amazing. We finally see that potential realized on Saturday, but it wasn't easy to get here, Farah. I mean, like, a lot of stumbles for Khamzat. I mean, I don't know if we were on Fight Island if we thought it would take this guy 5 years to become a UFC champion, but it happened. What do you think? Like, was this, given all the setbacks he had to go, like, probably helped with his mental growth? I think some of those hard fights with Burns and Usman taught him lessons of like pacing and how to fight, some of these more elite guys. So I don't know, were you expecting this to happen sooner, or do you think it's been right on time?
I think it's been right on time because when you think about it, like people are talking about, he said it, after he beat Gilbert Burns, the UFC told him it's a title shot, right? Mm-hmm. And that would have been at 170. And we saw he missed weight pretty badly when he was initially supposed to fight Nate Diaz and then that whole shuffle. So I think in hindsight, it's kind of better that he ended up becoming champion at middleweight. And listen, the whole double champ thing, he's been talking about it a very long time ago, pre-UFC. He's been the same guy, honestly, since he come out of the scene, probably a little bit louder because the platform that he gets in the UFC. But I remember interviewing him after he knocked out Ikram Aliskerov. And that was kind of the moment, like, I always thought he was special, but that moment I was like blown away because Ikram was like a Sambo champion. And if you watch that fight, he struggled to take him down, but that was him showing off the striking. It's similar to Topuria, his last fight before he got signed to the UFC. That was his first knockout win. I'm like, damn, this guy can strike too, like not just grapple. And that was a similar thing to Khamzat. Like when I saw him knock out Ikram Aliskerov, I'm like, okay, this guy is like a serious, legit threat. And when I talked to him backstage after the fight, he was talking about wanting to become double champion. And then I remember I was at the airport. I ran into Andreas Michael before we both boarded our flight. And he said, I want Khamzat to slow down. He was talking about how Khamzat just wants all these things and he wants him to slow down. And obviously he burst onto the UFC scene, fought twice in 10 days. Like that's always what he wanted. But I think him becoming champion at middleweight was probably the best thing for him. So I don't doubt that he could have become champion. It would have been Kamaru Usman. And we saw, that fight was a close one. Yeah, middleweight, short notice for Usman. Amazing performance by Kamaru. But I think I still would have picked him to become champ at 170, but I think this is better for him because obviously 185, I don't think the cut to 170 was something he was going to be able to do for too long. So I think this is better for him.
Yeah, I agree. Was there any point along the timeline where you thought we might not get here? I mean, I don't know how much we really thought that retirement he had during COVID was going to be something that was like long term, but he was clearly having some legitimate health issues for quite a while there. Who even know? They could still be lingering in some ways. Like you kind of hear things that he's like hyper conscious about who he puts himself around, like being in cold rooms, even like you saw him at the media day going in, like, before he went up on stage, he's like, give me my jacket. And then like 5 minutes in, he made someone give him his jacket. So he's clearly very conscious of all this stuff. But did we think like that might be too much for him to overcome at some point along the way?
Well, honestly, I remember I texted his manager at the time and we ended up putting I think you might have put the quote card together. I asked him and he shut it down immediately. Now, obviously, we don't know what the behind the scenes talks are between the two of them, but I thought of Khabib actually when this was happening to Khamzat, and I remember that injury layoff that he had, and that's a guy who was undefeated, dominant, and then it's like, damn, are we ever going to see Khabib fight for the title and realize his potential? So I thought of that a little bit, and that was kind of me hoping that, he'll get through this. So I don't think I entirely thought that it was over for him. It was just like a delay, but he ends up middleweight and ends up doing what he's doing. But you know how it is in the UFC. It just takes one or two really impressive performances. Look at Lerone Murphy. I don't think too many of us were talking about him being like a definitive title challenger. And then he goes out and does what he does to Aaron Pico. And it's like everyone's okay with it now with him getting a title shot, right? Mm-hmm. And when Khamzat wins, he usually wins in spectacular fashion. So in that regard, I didn't like think, okay, this wasn't going to happen for him. But maybe it was more like sad to see, you know what I mean? Like similar to the Khabib situation, like damn, like these guys are so good and they might not get their opportunity soon, at least while they're in their prime. But I always felt like this was his destiny to become champion.
Yeah, there's been a few of those guys. Like there was a window where it felt like that for Islam. Umar was having some issues. Like I don't know what it's been where like something has seemed to kind of derail their climb. But ultimately, we've seen those guys have got there. We'll see if Umar can do it too. But yeah, like what do you think of the fight itself? I mean, we've had a couple days to digest that now. I was there cage side. I was pretty captivated by it just because, like, you know, you're watching this guy compete in a title fight for the first time, being like, is Dricus finally going to try and do something? Like, the time goes by much faster when you're cage side too, and you're not listening to the broadcast. So for me, like, those 25 minutes went by pretty quick, and I was not like, this is terrible or anything. I was pretty locked in. But what about you from home?
Yeah, I mean, Dricus smiling in between rounds and him kind of never showing a never quit attitude and knowing that he has that in him is what made it exciting for me. Granted that Khamzat was dominating, I was always holding on to that. Okay, what if Dricus scrambles out of something? But, you know, I felt Dricus played it a little too safe. I think he was so keen on not getting caught. He had his head tucked in, just didn't want to get caught in any submissions. And I understand a lot of times when you try to get up, you end up giving up your neck, and that's something you don't want to do against Khamzat Chimaev. So I think that played in Dricus's mind. Also, the fact that they probably thought, okay, like, we've lost the first couple of rounds, let's just wait until the latter rounds and try to catch him there. And you saw those very small moments that Dricus had. He made the most of the opportunity, even on the feet, like throwing hard head kicks and strikes, and even getting, like, ending the fight in mount. Like, you knew that Dricus was going to fight till the end. So I think that the idea of that Dricus was never going to quit and he was going to keep fighting. Granted, I felt like he slowed down naturally, like cardio-wise, a little bit towards the end. His never die attitude is what made it exciting for me personally throughout the whole fight, is that you knew that if he had a chance to get up and capitalize, that he was going to do absolutely everything to capitalize on, which, to fair play to him, he kind of did. I just felt like he played it way too safe, because after rounds 1, 2, 3, you got to do something. Like, you're the champion, you're about to lose your belt, you've got to take a little bit more risk. So I felt like he could have taken a little bit more risk on the ground in terms of scrambling out, which he didn't. But I mean, look, Khamzat's a big, phenomenal grappler. I feel like he could do this to anybody at 185.
Yeah, his technique is remarkable. I was just talking to Renier de Ridder before we hopped on here, and like, he said he didn't look at that as a strength thing. It was all like a technique thing and just him being kind of a level above there. But it's surprising because, like, you look back to Dricus's pre-fight interviews, like, seems like he knew this was exactly what it was going to be coming his way. And he's saying, like, I'm going to do this. I'm not going to let myself be held. I'm going to, like, explode out. All these things that on paper you would say, this is what I have to do if I get in this bad spot. But I don't know if, like, his mind and his body weren't just clicking when he was in the cage, or if it's just so overwhelming when you're actually in there with Khamzat. I'm really curious to hear, like, what he ultimately says when he does a deep dive on his side of this performance, because it just seemed like the pre-fight, everything didn't align at all with what he did in the cage.
I think Khamzat also in certain elements played it a little bit safe, as in he wasn't aggressively attacking for submissions. Yeah. And I think that's a preservation of cardio as well. Like, he knows, like, that's been that one chink in his armor. He went and worked with Sam Calavita. Like, he knows that's the one thing. And he had never, like, those were 3-round fights. So I'm sure that was playing on Khamzat's mind. And the idea of maybe attacking, maybe towards the end of the rounds, maybe he could have taken that risk, Khamzat, of trying to attack a submission. But when you're dominating and making it look so easy and in firm control, like, why would you do anything else? You know what I mean? So I can't really fault Khamzat. And at the same time, I don't think Khamzat was threatened at all by anything Dricus had to offer from the ground jiu-jitsu-wise. Whereas when you see Gilbert Burns, he was letting Burns back up. And that's why the de Ridder matchup, and that's why de Ridder's name has been thrown around a lot by people, because that's a guy who's good off of his back and a much more dangerous submission threat than Dricus. So I think with Khamzat, it's like he just didn't at all feel threatened by anything that Dricus could provide off his back.
Do you think Khamzat kind of missed an opportunity here, though, right? Like, there was the hype for this fight was massive. Like, that press conference, the ceremonial weigh-ins, like, just the reaction he was getting, how badly people wanted to see him fight. And then we get to the fight, and by the 5th round, those same people are, booing pretty heavily and all that stuff. And we, talk about Lerone Murphy, moments, things like that. Like, if he had capped this off with even just like a ground and pound finish or a submission or something, we're having a completely different conversation about him, I think, right now. So do you think he kind of missed an opportunity there? Like, you can make up for it, maybe the next one that happens, but like right here, this felt like it could have been a truly star-making moment if he had got something crazy in there to finish the fight.
I mean, go back like a week or so, Anthony Hernandez and Dolice. If Hernandez rode that out and won by decision, we'd be having different conversations about him too. I think that what made it so impressive is that he ended up finishing him, right? So yeah, no, I definitely agree in that regard. But he also, listen, like he answered the questions. I think this did a lot for him, because what was the one thing people were nitpicking when it came to Khamzat Chimaev? You're always going to nitpick when it comes to a dominant or undefeated fighter, right? Like you're just, people talk about Lerone Murphy and they were calling him boring and whatnot, and then he goes out and scores that finish. Like, you're gonna nitpick when somebody's like essentially flawless. So with Khamzat, it was like he doesn't have the cardio. Every single person broke this fight down in the exact same way. Like, if Khamzat doesn't get him out of there early, the latter rounds, like he's gonna get tired and Dricus was gonna outlast him, and he proved that wasn't the case at all. Now, granted, it was one-way traffic, so there wasn't a lot of resistance from Dricus. Whereas I'm sure if Dricus was scrambling out of a lot of these things or defending a lot more takedowns, maybe that would have tired Khamzat out a little bit. But that wasn't that. He was just so freaking good that night. I felt like he could do that to Dricus another 20 rounds in a row. So it's like, it depends if you want to look at the positive or the negative. You want to look at the positive, he silenced all those cardio questions. If you want to look at the negative, then sure, you can say that maybe he should have taken a little bit more risk in trying to finish the fight. But look, one of the most dominant championship performances ever. What can you say?
Yeah, blame Armin Sarukian. He's the one who said keep wrestling when Khamzat wanted to strike, if anyone who saw that clip out there. So Coach Armin is telling him what to do out there. But UFC 319, a good night for Khamzat Chimaev. And I mean, it's always cool, right, to see these guys we see so early on like make their way and finally reach the top of the mountain. Like Max Holloway was one for me, interviewing him after like his first, second fight. And it's always nice when we kind of, as media, get to follow these journeys. So that must have been a cool experience to see him do what he did on that night.
Yeah, for sure. Because I mean, I don't really write about too many guys that are outside the UFC. I was writing up his fight announcements. Like, that's how high I was on him. Like, I don't think anybody clicked on those articles, but I was writing up his fight announcements. Like, just my pure excitement, putting my pure personal excitement that Khamzat has a fight, and I would write it up as a headline, even like with his name on it. Like, that's how high I was on him and how excited I was. So yeah, it's cool to see him kind of realize his potential.
We are back here once again on the Bohnfire with Mr. Luke Thomas to re-rank our most valuable fighters of 2025. Luke, a lot has changed since the last time we spoke in February to do this list. I think that was right after UFC 312 when Dricus du Plessis had won, Zhang Weili had won. So here we are 6 months later, and obviously not only has the sport changed with results, but the entire industry, I feel like, with especially this Paramount deal, because we don't really know how does this alter what the value of a valuable fighter is going into the next year when you're not trying to sell a certain amount of pay-per-views and all these kind of different elements that we've been so used to. So I guess that was the big question I threw to you off the top. Has the altered landscape in the sport changed how you would define and consider what a valuable fighter to the UFC is?
Yes. I don't see how it couldn't. I mean, I think some of the broad strokes just won't change. I mean, if you're, it's always going to be better to be ready than to not be ready, right? They need people who can stay in rotation at a given time. So that's going to be one. Second of all, having a large following. I mean, it's just hard to see how that would in any way not also be valuable. To the extent that it's of the same value remains to be seen. Perhaps it could be more, could be less, but it should be relatively still something of a priority. Being relatively powerful in any individual market. Are you big in China? Are you big in Spain? Are you big in France? Like, these things will still all be valuable. So being popular, being ready, being noteworthy to a geographic territory, among other considerations, I still think will be popular or still relevant. However, just taking away the pay-per-view element, there's a question of like what other things that we're not seeing become valuable. To what extent are the things that we consider valuable now downgraded and not as powerful? And so there's a more even balance of goods that you have to weigh at that point. I guess we'll have to see.
Yeah, it's still early. As Dana White has said many times, like, we have to get in a room and figure out all these things. So for us to sit here and know exactly what it's going to look like would obviously be premature. And especially here in Canada, and if you're in Australia, like, it's still the same for us. We're still going to be charged $80 pay-per-views for, I don't know, the lifetime of these current deals. I don't know why, if you were a Canadian, you wouldn't just pay for a VPN and then a Paramount subscription. I assume that would still be cheaper than the $80 a month, but we'll see how this ultimately works out. But as you sit here and we've had some time to digest this, heard all the people speak, where do you sit on this Paramount deal? Do you feel like this is going to be good for the sport, or too soon to tell, obviously?
Yeah, definitely too soon to tell. I mean, it's hard to see anything where the dominant MMA organization in the sport is getting over $1 billion a year as bad for MMA in that particular sense. Like, how does that in any way make anything bad? They'll have tons of money to effectively do what you would imagine is whatever they want, right? Like that provides some security. However, it's just hard to know exactly who's going to benefit the most. And I mean, for now, they're not changing the amount of events that they do. So like that part stays pretty consistent, the 30 fight nights and then the 13 numbered events, that all stays the same. To what extent does getting rid of pay-per-view meaningfully boost viewership? I don't know the answer to that. What does a really high quality UFC pay-per-view event do on CBS for ratings? I don't know the answer to that. We've actually never seen that. We've seen like little glimpses of that with Elite XC or Strikeforce or something, or even with Bellator and Fedor or something, and then even Kane versus JDS on Fox in the way that they did it for the premiere. But like in general, a full-on pay-per-view quality event on CBS, like what does that actually mean? What is the benchmark there? I have no really way of knowing that. It's actually kind of an interesting question. More to the point, there is at least some evidence, and again, that doesn't mean it's complete or in any way not challengeable. So listen to the words that I'm saying. There is at least some evidence to suggest that at least in broad swaths of the developed MMA markets, that MMA is in a slow but potentially inexorable decline. And so what does it mean in a world where UFC is, at least in theory, quite safe, but then the pieces around it start falling 2-3 years in, PFL goes away? I know you're asking about Paramount and UFC, but these other factors tend to be related in terms of the pipeline that just, sends talent up to the UFC, the general public's enthusiasm. So, I mean, it's just so many things we don't know that we really just have to kind of wait and see. But as a general rule, getting rid of pay-per-view has to be a big win for consumers. I don't know how else you can see it that way. Getting pay-per-view quality MMA from the UFC on CBS has to be a win. UFC being well capitalized for MMA fans on some level has to be a win. So there are plenty of reasons for optimism, but to the point that you raised, we're at such an early stage at how these things shake out and what happens in the broader world. It's just too hard to say.
I'll be curious to revisit these lists once we're like maybe a few months into that and see how people are actually being utilized. I mean, you hear all the stuff already about like, Dana kind of say you'll be paid in exposure in a way too, like when he gets asked about fighter pay. We'll see if that actually happens, because like how long were they at ESPN? How much really happened with that? You already see ESPN with its WWE deal. They're doing like this is the Sports Center commercials with like wrestlers and stuff. We didn't really get much of that, I feel like, with MMA fighters in the UFC era there. So I don't know. Obviously, Paramount has a lot of tentacles, and we'll see as we talk about valuable fighters here, what can they do to maybe use those to raise people's profiles, if at all? Because I feel like we've heard this in the Fox era, the ESPN era, like all these different things will bring value to the fighters and allow them to maximize their brands. But how many guys can you point to where you're like, they did that and it led to that? I don't know how many there was in those past two eras.
Yeah, again, that's another component too, which is how does this trickle down? To what ways does this trickle down to everybody else? And how does that incentivize or not them? And, Paramount Plus has more subscribers. So Paramount Plus has 77 million global subscribers. We actually don't know how many in the US. The estimates I've seen have it probably somewhere around 50, which would still make it considerably more than ESPN Plus. So that seems nice. But again, we don't really know that. And then more to the point, like, what does fighting mostly on, let's say, Paramount Plus streams relative to linear TV do for someone's exposure? Again, these are just really, really difficult questions to be able to know. We have to see what the evidence shows us.
Yeah, and that will all come in time. But for now, we have to, I guess, judge based off what we see and what we know in the current landscape. And before we go into our re-rankings here, Luke, I'll read off the list that you and I.
Yeah, I got to say, mine has some definite holes in it.
Me too.
But it's the top half of mine I feel pretty good about, actually.
Yeah, I don't feel too bad about the upper tier either. So I'll read these off quick. My list was number 10, Zhang Weili, number 9, Charles Oliveira, number 8, Sean O'Malley, number 7, Dricus Du Plessis, number 6, Khamzat Chimaev, number 5, Max Holloway, number 4, Alex Pereira, number 3, Tom Aspinall, number 2, Ilia Topuria, and number 1, Islam Makhachev. And Luke's list was number 10, Umar Nurmagomedov, number 9, Zhang Weili, number 8, Ian Machado Gary, number 7, Dricus Du Plessis, number 6, Tom Aspinall, number 5, Arman Sarukian, number 4, Shavkat Rakhmonov, number 3, Islam Makhachev, number 2, Khamzat Chimaev, and number 1, Ilia Topuria. So I guess, Luke, before we go into any adjustments we have made, 6 months later, looking back on that, what element of that do you maybe feel best about, and what do you feel worst about?
Well, definitely feel good about basically in general, I'd say top 6, but especially top 3. And it's not a hard call. It was just kind of unclear exactly where you were going to put them. Having Islam at 3, and I realize, it's not like he's been incredibly busy since the last time we did that list, but I think that's still probably a fair ranking. 2 at Khamzat Chimaev. I mean, there's some controversy, I suppose, about the nature of the win, but not that it was dominant. It was insanely dominant, and here he is at the top. And then number 1, Ilia Topuria, who, to my mind, has had the breakout performance of the year more than anybody else. I don't think that's really up for debate at this point. Also, if you'll notice, I left off Poatan from my list, which I also feel pretty good about as well. However, clearly I slept on Merab. Clearly I slept on that dude big time. Maybe overestimated Ian Gary a little bit. And then, I still think pretty highly of Dricus in general, but some reordering there I think is due.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's kind of how I look at mine too. I mean, I think my my 7 to 10 a little rough. I mean, Dricus loses some points. Sean O'Malley, I think probably falls down to the 20-ish range at this point, just because his path feels very unclear, and he's already sitting there talking about, like, maybe I'll retire and I'll never fight again. And you're like, okay, cool.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah. And Charles Oliveira, I guess, showing his value. I mean, he put Ilia Topuria over, I guess, in a big way, and then they can utilize them for things like main events and fight nights in Brazil on quick turnarounds. So I guess he still brings something there, but spoiler alert, I guess those 2 both got booted from my list here. So that was something that will come in the update. But I agree too. I think my biggest snub, or both of our biggest snubs, was Merab, if only because he's going to be, I think, the only champion this year who will compete 3 times. So how can you not say that's of extreme value? And maybe even 4 if he can somehow turn around and fight again in December if he gets through Corey Sandhagen. So I guess give Merab a little bit of his flowers and maybe why you think we overlooked him at the time.
I thought that Umar was still the guy of the future, and he might still be, by the way. I mean, Merab's getting a little bit older. Umar's younger than him. It's not out of the question that Umar will wear UFC gold by any stretch of the imagination. So, like, it's not like the craziest pick, but to not have Merab on there seems so wrong. He's consistent in terms of his readiness. He doesn't duck a challenger. Obviously, as a champion, you can't, but he seems like enthusiastic for the tough ones. I thought he was getting a little bit weird about why he didn't want to fight Umar, but then he goes out there and did really, really, really well against him. Obviously, finishing Sean O'Malley the way he did was extremely impressive. I thought that was really kind of special. Mm-hmm. And to your point, he's trying to stay active at the same time. Like, is he your biggest star? I was going to say pay-per-view, but that's not really all that relevant for too much longer. No, he's not. But in terms of how good he is, how reliable he is, how ready he is, and also how much better he's getting. And I think that is, you've seen this too. Like, for folks who are relatively new to MMA, one thing you really have to, and again, how this will change in streaming era, I don't know. Maybe not at all, but something that we're thinking about. But certainly in the height of the pay-per-view era, even for guys who were really, really good, it took a while before they really became stars. It took Anderson Silva a while. GSP got it maybe a little bit quicker, but even then it didn't happen overnight. It takes some time. And, it's hard to do that because it's hard to win consistently, but Merab is doing a lot of that. And, again, I don't think he's going to be the biggest star in the company, but I think he can, and is proving to be bigger than we estimated. And who knows how far that will go. He clearly deserves a spot on this list.
Yeah, agreed at this point. He's being extremely reliable, even when he does crazy stuff outside the cage, he still makes it to there and performs. And I know that was where the tension with like the UFC brass and all that stuff came in for multiple fights there, where he was just doing stuff that was maybe not the smartest and definitely not the smartest to broadcast it to the world. So
Yeah, exactly.
that got him in some hot water. But yeah, he's been amazing. And yeah, here we are. Next pay-per-view, he'll be the co-main event against Corey Sandhagen. So huge year for Merab. Who do you think fell the most? I mean, if Merab's stock went up the most, who do you think that you had inside that top 10 maybe dropped off?
Gotta be Drickus. I mean, this is a separate question, but when Errol Spence lost to Bud Crawford in July of 2023, both of those guys had a claim to maybe being the pound for pound best, or certainly on the pound for pound list, both of them. And then Errol goes and gets wiped out in the worst way imaginable, basically. And I had a conversation with a boxing coach. He's Caleb Plant's coach, but many others as well. Stephen Breadman Edwards. MMA fans will know him, but he's well known in boxing circles. And he made a point to me. He was like, if you're on a pound for pound list, you can lose, right? Especially if you fight another pound for pound guy. But you should not lose like that. If you want to hold a place on the pound for pound list, you cannot be so thoroughly dominated by another guy. And I was one of the only ones who was like, well, I mean, clearly what Khamzat did from a positional standpoint is his most overwhelming display of control I've maybe even ever seen in MMA. But I think in order to achieve that, you had to leave something on the table offensively. There's a choice that has to be made. Anyway, not here to relitigate it. But just on the previous point about the level of control, if you get controlled that much for that long and you can do nothing except save for the referee, just standing you guys up to restart the fight, like you got some serious questions you have to ask yourself. And I just don't know how you can be put on a list when the gap between yourself and the champion is so huge. When we're talking about, most valuable kinds of guys, Drickus is still very good, and I wouldn't write him. I'm not writing him off completely by any stretch, but when you lose like that, you need to be taken off certain lists. And for me, he's going to drop off this one.
Yeah, that was kind of my belief as well. I mean, he seemed like he was doing so great, had all the momentum of the good wins. He was killing it on the mic. Just everything seemed to be radiating well off him. But yeah, to have a performance like that, and then you look at the comeback avenue, like to get through guys like Renier DeRitter and Anthony Hernandez, like people that might see that and be like, I can replicate at least elements of it.
Right.
That's kind of a scary climb back to the title for him, it feels like. So maybe this was his moment. And yeah, I don't think they're doing, UFC South Africa unless he's at the helm or in position to fight for a title again. So it's all the consequences potentially that come with this loss outside of the belt too are pretty significant. So yeah, Drickus took a drop for me too. I think that's totally fair. When I was doing it last time, I kind of did like a top 30 that I read off to you. I won't do this, but I did a couple tiers there, and just like almost jokingly, I had John Jones and Conor McGregor at 11 and 12, just because we were like, we have to mention them somewhere. They're officially nowhere to be found in the top 30. Like we're done here. Yeah.
Listen, they might come back. I don't know. John seems like he's talking a game about coming back for the July White House show. I'll believe it when I see it. He's deeply, deeply, deeply unreliable. And God only knows what state Conor's in. Every time he puts out a training video, he somehow looks older and worse, which is quite the feat. So, no.
Yeah. As you sit there in DC, do you think this White House card even happens?
Can I tell you, I'll be honest about this. As someone, I've lived here for a long time, and I don't know how they're going to pull this off. I mean, so understand something, right? If they were going to have this in a traditional venue, let's say downtown at the Capital One Arena, I think you've been there probably for some UFC shows. I saw Dominic Cruz fight Demetrius Johnson there. Alistair Overeem fought Jairzinho Rosenstrike there. It's downtown in the city, and so there's entrances and exits on all four sides. Now they might close one side off, for whatever, but in general, there's entrances and exits on all four sides. It's built for that kind of a thing. It's one thing to be able to say, hey, can we put up a kind of makeshift cage and facility on the south side of the White House lawn? Like, is there enough space? It's an 18-acre space, yes. The spacing is not really the issue in terms of, like, can you erect a cage here and have fights? The issue is, for me, among other things, how on earth are you going to get 20,000 people in and out of a place where there's one entrance and exit? And it's tightly controlled. I mean, how do you let I'm just asking as like somebody who lives here, and I know people who work at the Pentagon, I know people who work at various levels of the government. How do you get people on the White House lawn without a security clearance? Like, I just don't understand this. And then once they're there, how do you protect that space from the White House for somebody who might just want to walk up out of their seat and then go, and go there or gather intel from there? Like if you're a spy, I'm being dead serious. If you're a spy, wouldn't you like target that as a thing that you want to do, like get in on that show? And to say nothing of how do you maintain, like where does the crowd queue up? How do you get them in on time? How do you safely get them out on time? I know people have brought up the fact that, it's going to be hot in July in DC. It might rain. These are all true things as well. Those are solvable problems relative to the other ones. But from a security standpoint, when you've got a facility like the Capital One Arena, it's easy to get folks in and out because there's all these points of egress one way or the other. But the White House has none of that by design because it's trying to protect itself. What I think is at least something to consider, because I'm not in these meetings, they might hold the event, but I think that they might have to really dial back how many people get to go, because that just seems like a security nightmare that I am very curious to see how they solve.
Yeah, and then the logistics element of what Dana has been saying over and over about the weight of the octagon on the south lawn. Like I hear maybe it can't be there and it might have to be in a different spot there, which kind of takes away his vision.
They can do it. If you look at a map, they can do it what's across E Street, which is called the Ellipses, and which is not technically in the White House lawn. That's technically right next to Constitution Avenue, and that's big and open, and you can access it by the street. That seems to me like a different proposition, and it's still right there by the White House. The only thing I would point is that's where that's where Donald Trump made his famous January 6th speech where he encouraged everyone to go walk to the Capitol. So kind of a funny echoing of history there, if I do say so myself.
Yeah, we'll see. We know Dana White and those guys get very stubborn when something gets put in their minds. So it'll be interesting to see what happens over these next 9 months or so. But okay, Luke, let's get into our list here. Top 10. I'm not going with the tiers below. So let's start at 10. Who did you have there to kick off your list?
All right. I realize that it's not like the person I'm about to say doesn't need to be on this list. I'm kind of estimating them a little bit. I feel like I'm grading on a curve a little bit, but I don't feel like right taking them off. I'm going to bump back Zhang Weili to 10. I'm going to keep her in the top 10. Because I still think that we haven't really fully maximized the value, although you did see her get that walkout with Dana at UFC Shanghai and whatnot, which was kind of cool. But, that's a small little gesture. Mm-hmm. Still, I think that she's one of these women's fights where if they put her up against Shevchenko, there's a decent chance she could win. She could prove to be enormously valuable. Obviously, in that market that they're still trying to grow, she still holds a ton of value. So for domestic stateside fans and even Canadian fans, Zhang Weili, how important is she? Well, it's up for debate. Obviously very good, but up for debate. But I think from a global perspective, I feel wrong taking her off that list. So I'm going to put her at 10.
Yeah, that's fair. She got bumped off mine, just like she's, I think, 12 or something like that. So not too far. But yeah, no fights since last time. She is aging more and more. And she might have her toughest fight coming up if she fights Valentina Shevchenko. And then if you lose that one, then where does it kind of leave you? Obviously, you're still a champion, assuming they don't make her vacate the belt like, some of these male champions that they've had in deeper divisions. But yeah, she's a tricky one. I had no women on my revised top 10 list here. I was thinking, though, Luke, the looming return of Amanda Nunes. Like if she claims she's back for more than one fight, she wants to win that title, make another run of however many defenses. I wasn't inclined to put her in the top 10, but as you're thinking about women that could be there, I think the only real options are the champions, Kayla Harrison as well, and then Amanda. I don't know. Can she make enough of an impact where she could be like a true valuable fighter, even if you extend it to the top 15 or top 20, or is it just too many uncertainties around this comeback?
I mean, if in a world where you don't need to sell pay-per-views, I clearly she is of extraordinary importance, and a big return fight or potentially more, assuming as she wins, especially, could prove to be quite valuable. But it also seems really speculative at this point. I mean, I do think that she's going to come back and at least fight Kayla, but what if Kayla thumps her? Again, which I'm not predicting. I'm just saying, I'm asking, in a world where that happens, where are we now? So to me, it's not enough juice there to put top 10, but I do recognize that that's a bubble call for sure.
Yeah, we'll see if she comes back and wins the fight, retires again. Then obviously that's a very
Yeah.
bad thing. But it wouldn't put past her. We've seen this stuff happen before. So yeah, we opening my list at 10. I didn't give him a complete bump out of the top 10, but Dricus Du Plessis fell to that 10 spot for me. I do feel like he still has big fights in him. A door could be open at 205. Actually, last time when we did this, you spoke very highly about what you could maybe see out of him at 205. So maybe there's an opening there to kind of change things up. We'll see what happens in this title fight. So I think he's still there. He's entertaining. He's young enough. I could see him, being in a lot of big fights going forward. But as long as Khamzat Chimaev is here, I do not see him getting that belt back. But yeah, he's one I think still has value, and he seems to be taking it the right way. Like, what did you think of his first reaction to the loss that he posted the other day?
I thought his reaction was pretty great. I thought it was exactly the right one you would need. I thought his coach's reactions have been real weird.
Yeah.
They don't inspire me with confidence at all. They thought they were going to cakewalk through this guy. And honestly, I didn't think he was going to cakewalk, but I thought he would have some level of resistance. You know what I mean? He had nothing, zero. I'm not saying that if he has a year to work on this and they had a rematch that the fight couldn't look different and potentially even end differently, like it could. But I mean, I just want to be as clear as I can. The difference in skill level on the ground, obviously, between Khamzat and Dricus, it is at least in theory, or I should say, it is at least worth considering that it might be insurmountable. Like, he's so much better that you could work the rest of your career, and as long as he's working in his career, you'll never make up that difference. That's how bad it was. So yeah, I like that he said what he said, but he's got some real questions to ask himself about who's around him.
Yeah, that was definitely some interesting reactions on Submission Radio. The one thing I did like that he said, though, is we're in no way pushing for an immediate rematch, because the same thing.
Yeah, how could you?
Hey, we've seen it happen.
What on earth would be the logic of that,
Agreed, but we've seen instances of that before where it's like, oh, why are we doing this now? It's just going to be the same. You can't make up that skill gap, and then it goes and it ends up the same, and then you get guys that are 0-2 against the champion, and it's a terrible spot.
Now where are you? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'll go back to back here. This is actually someone who probably got the biggest jump on my list. Last time we spoke, he wasn't even scheduled for a title fight, let alone considered. We did not think he'd be next, but as we sit here today, he is the current UFC welterweight champion with the ability to beat one of the greatest fighters we've ever seen in the sport in his first title defense. It is Jack Della Maddalena. He has obviously got the Australian market behind him. We'll see if he ever gets a title fight or defense in Perth. Obviously, his first one coming up is huge. Everything could change here, but he's young. He's one of the only champions on the youthful side of 30. So as Jack can stay healthy, if he can keep getting better, the personality has a fair bit of work to do, I would say, in terms of, becoming more quote heavy machine. But in terms of the fighting, he is incredible. And who knows what could be on the other side of an Islam Makhachev fight if he can deny him of that belt. Huge matchups, so many good contenders at welterweight. So I like Jack for like his fighting spirit, for his, when he is healthy, his availability, his willingness to do it all. So I like that, but with the caution, he could go out there and have the Dricus Du Plessis side of the performance against someone like Islam, and then we're talking about him falling significantly.
You read my mind, if I may. I have him at 9 as well. And I didn't know exactly where to put him, too, because, here's the thing. So I did a bunch of tape study heading into the Bilal and JDM fight. And if you look at the tape study there, one of the big things that shows up is that JDM would never do a great job of greeting a takedown from someone else at the point of contact. They would get to his legs, take him to his, to a hip or to his rear end, and then he would fight his way back to his feet. And that's an important skill. But, against someone like Bilal or against someone like Islam, you're like, dude, if you can't, at least on some level, stop those takedowns at the point of contact, you're going to have a real hard time. And then he did. He got way, way better at it, way better. And then to say nothing of the fact that he had new skills to get up to his feet. So it's like, on one level, he definitely answered some questions that I have. On another level, it's like, okay, but like Islam's real different. Islam's going to chase the back in ways that I think, or just be more careful about how he approaches a fight strategically. It's like, how does that scale up to a guy like Islam? I just don't know the answer to that. So I can't tell if I'm overselling him or underselling him. I know he's made real improvements, but where he goes from here is really hard to say.
Yeah, very difficult. Go back to back. Who's your 8?
All right, for 8. You know what? In a world where pay-per-view isn't as important, seems to me we should have considered this guy even more. Maybe we should have had him on the list last time. But give me Pantoja. Give me Alexandre Pantoja. What are we doing sleeping on him? He's so freaking good. I have been waiting for him to lose after all those wars he's had, and he just seems to be getting, for the most part, better and better. He wants to stay active. He wants to set records such that he can, obviously at flyweight, which is a very tall order, but he's trying to. He's looking for contenders. That division is getting better. And so I just feel like, is flyweight ever going to be lightweight or welterweight? Probably not as an attraction, but that division's getting better. He's consistently gotten better and has proven to be quite the championship mainstay in this division while racking up some pretty important accolades. How did we leave him off the list? No more. Pantoja.
Agreed. Spoiler alert, I did leave him off my new list, but I think I had him in like the top 13. I think I had him, where is it, 13 or 14? So yeah, you got to put every champion at least somewhere like on the bubble. And that, I mean, if you're putting a champion outside the top 20, that's probably not a good sign for them, but reliability and consistency at the championship level forces your way up this list. So we'll do that. And then, man, could be interesting though, because if he loses to Joshua Van, where does someone like Josh Van go as a 23, 24-year-old champion? He could be on here next time around if we do this again. So that will be interesting. As we go to my 8, and I'm probably going to get some heat for this one. This might be the most controversial selection on the list. It is one Paddy Pimblett, who breaks his way into the top 10. Last time we spoke was obviously pre-Michael Chandler. Didn't know who he would beat. Still, questions to be asked, but Paddy Pimblett could be part of one of the bigger lightweight fights. Like if they build him and Ilia Topuria properly, if that's the direction we go, like that's a pretty huge one. Obviously not picking him to win that fight right now, but he seems like he's kind of got his mind more so in the game than ever, as opposed to just blowing up in between camps and kind of embracing that meme of himself. I think Paddy Pimblett is someone who can do a lot of big fights for the UFC in this lightweight division for many years to come. So even if he doesn't get that belt, he's got the traction, the UK market, the personality, all that stuff that feels hard not to put him somewhere on this list. Maybe 8 is too high above like current champions and former champions. But if you look at potential ceiling as we go from here, factoring in all the elements, he seems like a decent choice at least.
What do you think is his next fight?
That's the question, right? Which direction are we going to go to? This lightweight division can go many ways. I've said since the day after Ilia beat Charles Oliveira that if you want the biggest like high profile fight in my mind that checks all the boxes in terms of like intrigue and maybe some heat, it is Paddy. If you want the best fight, like the best MMA fight that we think would be the most competitive, Arman Tsarukyan. If you're trying to get Ilia maybe the biggest highlight, I think it would be Justin Gaethje. So who's going to get the title shot? And the cards are going to go fall from there. I could see maybe us getting Paddy versus like Dan Hooker next or something like that. That feels like the most winnable of the top 6 guys for him right now. Maybe Gaethje.
Yeah, that's about right. I think Gaethje might be the biggest one because of the anti-grappling.
Yeah, will Gaethje take that fight though is the question. I have no...
Why would you if you're him?
Exactly. So you got to take those into account. Like I think the UFC would probably love to do that fight. I know they had talked about it at one point for Abu Dhabi, but I think Justin is holding out hope he's going to be the guy to get that call. And then, maybe Arman fights Paddy or something. But again, throw a dart at the lightweight rankings and you're good with any of these fights. Like I'm interested in all of them. So that's fine with me. I will flip it here. My number 7 was Merab Dvalishvili. So he gets the pretty big jump there. We said it all. He's being extremely reliable. I said feel like a long time, it's going to be very tough for anyone to overtake this bantamweight division and be the guy that's the dominant, consistent champion because all these freaking guys are so good. And it felt like it was just going to get hot potatoed. But here he is. He's established himself. One title defense away from tying Aljamain Sterling's record, I believe. And it would all have happened in 1 year, which is crazy.
That is crazy. That's insane. For my 7, we didn't have him on the list last year in part because of the way the year had gone. But given where he's at and given what looks like could be ahead, I at least think for the time being I would put him on the list, which is give me Volk. And I'm going championship heavy here, but I really believe that. I think he's got a good chance to beat Lerone Murphy. I thought he looked great in his return, essentially, against Diego Lopez. Good physical condition, good wherewithal, good decision making. He's still very skilled. There's some questions about durability and whatnot, which is normal. And again, I don't think he's got a whole lot longer left in the game, but he's important for the Australian market. He is, well regarded as a person. There's a lot of value to him to having on your roster and then having active. He, for the most part, he had to take time off because of the losses and whatnot. But if he's healthy and like competing, he wants to get after it. Like he's ready to go. They were going to have him fight at this Noche card, for example, and before people I think rebelled, like Yair Rodriguez. Anyway, so give me Volk at the 7th position.
Okay, yeah, that might be the biggest discrepancy in our rankings, but I don't hate it. The only thing I worry is like seeing all kind of the pre-fight content or what came out after the fight, where it was like if he gets knocked out again, his family wants him to retire and all that stuff. So I feel like the next Volk loss, whether it's next fight or 3 fights from now, might be the end of his road, especially if it's like a knockout. So
I know, but if we're doing these lists like every 6 months, you know what I mean? For the next 6 months, I feel real confident about that. You know what I mean? For the next 6 years, no, I don't feel confident about it at all, right?
Yeah. No, I completely agree. That's sound logic. Can't argue with that. Okay, so as we go into the top 6 here, my top 6 in terms of the people is unchanged. It's just that the order in which I put them. So
that's so funny. Mine is exactly the same, except the order changes a little bit. Yeah,
exactly. Okay, so we'll see how that compares. So opening my top 6, I had him at 4 last time, and potentially falling even harder, Alex Pereira. I know you didn't love him on my list last time, but he was coming off such a hot year. He felt so good. And the worst case scenario that we describe happened. He lost in a very unthrilling and unsatisfactory way. If you're an Alex Pereira fan, he will get his chance to get it back, but I feel even worse about his chances for the rematch than I did about the first fight, which I thought was terrible for him. So he's hanging on to this top 6 spot by a thread. And people are just like, oh, if he loses to Ankalaev again, he's just going to go to heavyweight. I'm like, if he loses to Ankalaev again, of course, method is a huge element of that. But what would make me excited or confident that he's going to suddenly go and become heavyweight champion or something like that? Like if he gets knocked out by Ankalaev, that, or even grappled and submitted, that does not make me feel good about a fight with Tom Aspinall for him.
Brother, you're preaching to the choir over here. Yes. I like Poatan. It's weird how his fans went from the most vocal to the most quiet. It's really quite weird.
Yeah. And
more to the point, I can believe that he underperformed relative to what he's actually capable of in the first fight, whether it was injury or another reason. I can fully believe that. I think Ankalaev's not on my list. You know what I mean? It's not like I think necessarily the world of him either, but Poatan's beatable, and he might be beatable in his next one. And if he is, it really kind of blows up a lot of plans. Like Ankalaev could also be just a really bad matchup for him, in which case, what can you really do? So to me, it's so much unknown about exactly what kind of rebound we're going to get here that I just can't pick him. But I understand that if he does rebound, it does certainly open up some interesting possibilities. Yes.
Yes, because they're not giving Ankalaev the trilogy fight, I imagine, and then he goes back to fighting guys like Yuri Prochazka and Khalil Roundtree, who he has already defeated. So maybe he can get another little championship run here and be a big piece on their chessboard. Who did you have at 6?
All right, so I had him at 4 last time. I have to drop him now to 6. And you might be like, how is he still on your list at all? This is probably the one that folks are going to be doing the most head scratching, which is Shavkat Rakhmonov. I had him. I thought he was going to have a big breakout, first 2 quarters essentially of 2024, and it just didn't happen. Now, of course, there has been some incidents where his family was in a car accident. I understand that they're okay, but you can imagine how this would shake things up. He also had the injury and the healing that he was having to do from whatever medical intervention that he had to take. So it's not like he had a bonanza time. So I have to drop him. You could argue dropping him off the list. However, I am still so high on him, and I do think we're going to get him in probably the next quarter, in all likelihood, maybe the last quarter of the year, that, I still think very, very highly of his ability. And I think that he can give anyone in this division real problems, but, he had to get bumped down a little bit to bring him back to earth a little bit.
I think I agree. Yeah, he's in that weird phase right now that Habib had, that Islam Makhachev had, where it's just like you can't get healthy, and you're right there on the cusp of the title shot, and you're fighting. You get one fight in 2 years, and everyone says you're a pullout merchant, and hating on you. But then they found their footing, and they came back, and they kind of met the potential we saw in them. So maybe Shavkat's in that phase. Hopefully, it doesn't extend too much longer, and we can see him back and see what he's really about. But yeah, I agree with your analysis there. So, okay, how did I flip mine here? My top five now. Where did I have him before? Oh, he stayed in this position. Max Holloway at 5. I was good with him last time. There was some concern. I felt the hangover of the Justin Gaethje knockout would stick with him for a long time in terms of being a draw and a seller and all that stuff. He loses to Topuria, but then he comes back and gets the win over Dustin Poirier in the trilogy. And here he is, still a big name, still the BMF champion. We say we value champions here, and people love Max Holloway. So, of course, you can mention potential decline, tough fights ahead, all that stuff, but he is one of the biggest names and most beloved fighters in the sport. So he deserves the top 5 spot still, in my opinion.
And that win over Dustin was thorough. I mean, for the most part, pretty thorough. He still got it. So I can understand that. So he's in my bubble section, but I can understand why he would be higher depending on your perspective. For me at 5, this one I kind of debated a little bit as well, but I'm going to bump him up a spot, even though, once again, nothing happened, which is Tom Aspinall. Tom Aspinall, I guess something did happen. He got made champion. Happen.
He was
yeah. Just not in the cage itself. That's by no fault of his own. Now, of course, the argument that I've always been making is I don't even know if he beats John. I mean, maybe he does, maybe he doesn't, but that's not the point. The point is that's the guy John has to fight. He clearly doesn't want to. Let's just move on. And eventually they did. He could lose to Cyril Gane in his next fight. I mean, who the hell knows? But for the time being, he's the standard bearer of excellence in that division. He's young, he's promising, he's athletic. He obviously has done an enormous amount of really qualified winning. You got to keep him on the list, and I think they're going to try and keep him busy. So give me Tom Aspinall at 5.
Yep, I love that one too. I had Mr. Aspinall at 4, so he went from 6 to 4 on my list. Heavyweight champion in the world, a guy who wants to be active, who has youth on his side. That's got to be a huge check mark. We'll see what the energy is like between him and Cyril Gane and how they promote this fight. I believe they are going to do a press conference in Paris during fight week next week, so we'll get to see some interaction with them and
nice.
See what Tom Aspinall can do to kind of move the needle here. So we'll see how that one goes. Tom at 4 for me. Did you say your 4 yet? No, you didn't.
No. My 4 is going to bump up one from last time, which is Arman Tsarukyan. And again, not like a guy. In fact, we did that ranking in February. He had his issues in January. He has not had any sense. He was able to fill in on short notice. Not short notice. I'm sorry, backup for the last lightweight title fight. And honestly, I agree with Habib's analysis. I think Arman's the toughest fight for Ilia, and none of that changes. He's young. He has a very, very difficult skill set. He obviously speaks some English. There is a real threat for him. He could absolutely be holding that title. That is in no way an exaggeration, and potentially for quite some time, depending on how the matchups go and what his development looks like. That is somewhat speculative, but I'm going to leave it there. Give me Arman Tsarukyan in the 4 position.
Yeah, we'll see who he ends up fighting. I think he did make a misstep by not taking the Gamrot rematch as the Abu Dhabi main event, because he would have a fight in the bag, and then all this talk about the title shot would not have all the caveats of this guy, had all the stuff in January. So high on Arman Tsarukyan, he is very good, but yeah, we just need him to get in there and fight. I mean, we're approaching, by the time he's scheduled and booked and we get to the fight, it's going to be pretty much a year since that whole incident happened, which is
debacle.
Not ideal. So, into the top 3, which I think for you will be the same crop of 3.
My top 3 doesn't change a bit.
Yep. I had a jump from 6 to 3. Khamzat Chimaev is now my 3. He was my 6 before, and I think it was because he alleviated pretty much all the concerns we had at that time. The Dricus fight was looming, but it wasn't booked. We didn't know where it was going to happen, when it was going to happen. Well, it happened in the United States on a pretty good timeline. He made it through the camp. He performed. So, all those worries that you had about the guy faded out in my mind, and here he is, finally the champion. You just wonder going forward, right? I thought it was going to be very telling if they were actually going to put him on Abu Dhabi and do that quick turnaround. That would have been dream scenario. Can understand maybe wanting to hold him for the Paramount era or something like that, but Still a little trepidation. I could put him at 2 or 1 if you were really, really high on it, but I need to see what he now does when he has that belt and he's not just, going back to Chechnya and hanging out with whoever and enjoying that lifestyle for the next 8 months. And we don't see him till, next summer or something. That would be my concern.
Yeah, fair enough. He is worthy of a big jump. He already had a pretty high place on my list, so I'm going to keep it as is. So for my number 3, it's got to be Islam Makhachev. And again, this is somewhat speculative. He could end up losing to JDM, in which case you have to really reevaluate this. But he's been the pound-for-pound best guy in the sport. He has been a steady ship in difficult seas. And he, the thing that really I always say stands out about Islam's game is, does he have necessarily some of the same high-powered offense of some of the people he gets compared to, whether it's Khamzat or Khabib or whoever? No, not necessarily, although he does have very good offense. But what he really, really stands out for me is he just doesn't make bad decisions very often. I mean, he really, really is a guy whose defense is good, whose choices are good, decision-making is good. And I think it's just going to be really, really tough for guys to deal with. I don't know how you can't put a guy like that high on your list. If that guy's not high on your list, I don't know who is, right? So, yeah, give me Islam at 3.
Yeah, love it. He on my list slid actually from 1 to 2. I had him at 1 last time, and yeah, it's just tough. I mean, I wonder, you hear all these different opinions on how long he's going to keep fighting, all this stuff. I asked him directly. He said, I'm just getting started, brother. So like, I don't know what that means, a couple more years potentially, but he loses to Jack, then it's a different conversation. He wins, then the door opens to some absolutely gigantic fights, not only in that weight class, which would be fascinating. Like if he goes in there and he does a run with like Shavkat and Sean Brady and Ian Gary, like he beats this generation of those welterweights, like we're going to have some very interesting conversations about his legacy and where he fits in the GOAT discussion. So I like Islam's upside even still. I was concerned about him saying he wasn't filling into the welterweight frame very well, but that was right after he had dropped the belt and all that stuff. Now he's seemingly looking much bigger. So I'm curious to see what this looks like. He's a huge star for the sport. Everything we put out related to him clicks massively. Like our interview did, I think like 600,000 views on YouTube or something like that. Wow. So yeah, he's a star, man. And obviously that's being like kind of an exclusive, very rare. He's not out there like Ilia doing a press conference at his own event every single weekend. So like, that there is value in being kind of in the shadows. So he's doing it all right, but I had him at 1 last time and he slid to 2 here. Not through his own fault, I think, more so because of who the number 1 did what they did. And we will get to him in a second, but your number 2, I assume, stand pat. And was that still Khamzat Chimaev?
My number 2 is Khamzat Chimaev. I can't put him number 1, but obviously he is highly deserving of either the top spot or the one right next to it. He had, in my mind, the second biggest breakout win of 2025, or the most important and high-profile win. And again, I criticized parts of it because I did feel like he made a choice to surrender some of his offense to make the control possible. But as I also indicated, I don't know if I've ever seen an MMA fighter, at least in the modern age, so thoroughly controlled in this way. It's really quite remarkable. And now you look at the rest of the division, and it's like I would favor him over everyone, but I think there are some fights where Fluffy, for example, where it could be really interesting. But more to the point, it's just electricity being sent down into 185, and that starts at one man, which is Khamzat Chimaev. You got to put him minimum top 3 on your list, and for me, he's going to sit firmly at number 2.
Do you think like the casual fan did not like that performance from him? I know people like us see the mastery and the beauty and all that stuff, but I don't know, do you think that damaged his popularity, the intrigue in his fights? Or we've seen the sport happen so many times. You can have a fight like that, you come back, he knocks someone out, he submits him in the first couple rounds. This is ancient history.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of that. I mean, the overall record on Khamzat is one where he's pretty exciting. And now the question is, you have to ask yourself is, if he has to go 5 rounds, does he have to fight this way because otherwise he doesn't have the cardio necessary, in which case you might get more of these. But as it stands, what does the broader record show? What it shows as of now is that this fight, in terms of its lack of excitement for the casuals or anybody else really, is somewhat aberrant. This is not the typical thing. So until it becomes the typical thing, I'm not going to treat it that way.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Who do you think they have him fight next?
Well, again, it really depends on the fight outcomes and what they look like. I have a feeling it's going to be the winner of RDR and Fluffy. I think there's just much more excitement for those guys anyway. But what if that fight ends up being a stall fest or something? It's really hard to say. My hunch is, forced to pick a side of the bracket, it's going to be that one.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with Imavov and Baralho coming up here at UFC Paris. I know both those guys want it bad. Okay, Luke, so I guess we are in sync on our number one here. It's so interesting listening back to our last show. Like, obviously, Islam Makhachev was the lightweight champion. Ilia Topuria was the featherweight champion. Tom Aspinall was an interim champion. Khamzat Chimaev was not a champion. But this is a huge adjustment. He's going from last time we spoke being the featherweight king. He's now the lightweight king. And I think the big question I asked you too is like, do we make Ilia versus Islam, or do we keep them apart because they're clearly both so valuable to the UFC? Well, I think we've got our answer the way this all shook out. But Ilia, he was one last time for you. He moved up for me to one. And I think obviously everything that he's doing in there, the performances, the way he gets traction in the media, all these things, what he's setting up for the future, it's all there. I don't know. Go on. Take it from there.
He had the biggest performance of the year by far. Just by far, moved up a weight class and iced the guy in 3 minutes. Like, when you do stuff like that, the world opens up in ways for you that it just cannot for anybody else in the sport. And, he owned it from the word go. He's been something of a thorn in the side of fans, but then now forced them to come to his side. He called his shot. We've already talked about it. He's borrowed from, vintage McGregor, but if you're going to borrow from someone and then actually follow through on what you're going to do, it's hard to imagine anyone other than vintage McGregor is exactly the kind of blueprint you would want to have. I have questions about how long he'll be in the sport. As I mentioned, I think Saryukian is a very real threat, but given what he's done, and given, again, they haven't even gone to Spain yet to really see exactly how they receive him. I would imagine it would be rapturous. He has just set himself apart from the rest of the pack, I think, by a pretty considerable distance as a promotional entity, as an elite fighter, as a guy who is going to make good on promises. Like, he just does it all and does it in the most exciting way possible and the most authoritative way possible. How could he be anything other than number one on that list?
Agreed. Yeah. And you have a element you can promote him with that you've never been able to use for any fighter in history before. The only guy to win titles in 2 divisions well undefeated. No one has ever done this. So, like, he is actually doing something special and unique, and you should be able to grab that and push it as absolutely hard as you can as a valuable entity. So yeah, it's hard to overlook Ilia. You agree with that same question? I mean, I know Islam did that media press conference in Dagestan over the weekend with Khabib and Usman and all that guy, and he expressed more interest in the Ilia fight than ever before. If they both win their next fight, do you go to that, or is it the same thing as last time? You use them both as their individual entities because they're the two arguably biggest stars in the sport.
I just think if Islam wins, they're not going to do it, but I think that you should. I think you get a moment in time. We didn't get Fedor Randy. We didn't get GSP Silva. There's a million super fights we didn't get. You have to do it when the window is available, even if it doesn't make sense in a lot of other ways for other reasons. If you want to make a super fight across weight classes, you have to make it while it's available, and it is available. Now, if he loses, you really have a good chance to do it against JDM. Although it loses some of its shine. But either way, it's the fight to make. And, it causes complications and problems. But if you want to make historic fights, you got to do historic things. And that means striking while the iron is hot. It's hot. Time to go.
Do you sit here and just hold Ilia and let this Islam and Jack fight play out seemingly in November? And then just, if Islam wins, you do the fight? Or do you have Ilia fight someone else in the interim and risk blowing it up?
Yeah, I don't think you do it unless you're really clear about what your plans are. And it doesn't seem to me like they're super clear about that. But if your plan is like, hey, we're going to make this fight, then you make them wait, yes.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Luke. Well, I think that puts a bow on our re-rankings here. Like I said, I think this is a good thing to do every 6 months or so.
Yeah,
so we'll get you back maybe at a time where I'm not like still trying to hang on to every breath after my bachelor party last weekend. But we made it through this. So we're getting close here, Luke. 10 days from the wedding.
Can't believe someone decided to marry you, but congratulations just the same.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Well, now I know how you feel.
Yes. You're going to have kids soon, and you'll never sleep again. But other than that, your life's going to be great.
I love it, Luke. Well, I appreciate your time as always, man. This is great, and we'll get you back on here soon. So thank you. I'm going to take a quick break. Make sure to obviously follow this man on YouTube, on all his social media platforms. You're the man, Luke. Thank you. I will take a quick break and be right back to wrap things up. And that does it for another edition of the Bohnfire podcast. Thank you so much to Farah and to Luke for their time. A lot of fun as always. Two of my favorite people in the business, those two. So a great chat there, and would be curious to know what you guys think of Luke and I's re-ranked most valuable fighters. Share your top 10. Where were we off? Who did we overlook? Who did we underlook? Love to hear the feedback. Leave those in the comments, or feel free to send me an email or a tweet or whatever you want. I'm available on pretty much every platform, and I try to be as responsive as possible to you all. You'll always see me in the comments. So any questions you have about this list or anything else, I will do my best to answer those on all the platforms. But for now, that does it. As I said, not going to commit to a show for next week on the wedding week, but we might do something a little special, maybe something on site where you can see where we're enjoying the week, and we'll talk a few MMA things, but not committing. If you guys don't see me until Noche UFC week, you know why, and it's because I will be getting married. So big life event coming up. I know this the show is very important to me, but there's all the time in the world to do more of these episodes and only one wedding day. So we'll see where the priorities fall, how busy things get. For now, love you all. Appreciate all the support. Keep doing it. Keep pushing. Let's make this thing great. And for now, that does it. I will see you all back here soon by the Bohnfire.